Ohio State set for their 5th game of the season as we welcome in Tony Gerdeman from the BuckeyeHuddle.com. Gerd, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
So we just heard about a couple of young DBs who were thrust into the spotlight on Saturday against Wisconsin. Seems like every week there's a couple more guys that are hurt, and every week Ryan Day says, well, we don't expect this to be a long-term thing, but every week there's more and more guys. Is Ohio State injury prone? Are they getting some of these minor things out of the way, or is this going to be an ongoing story for the entire season?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's happening at running back. We saw that they've already lost Evan Pryor. We know Jackson Smith-Njigba has been dealing with his thing. As you mentioned, the corners, and we get an availability report every week, and sometimes guys are not playing that aren't even on the report. And Ryan Day then said today, yeah, they're going to start meeting about that later in the week to have a more accurate report for the reporters. But it is interesting that at this point even since the COVID year, it's like every week you expect somebody to miss something, it seems. And COVID is completely different than what's going on now with all of these different injuries. But like you said, none of them have been termed long-term at corner and situations like that, Jackson Smith-Njigba. But I wonder also how much of this is the level of talent that Ohio State has compared to everybody else, where they can afford to sit guys and not rush guys back. And how many of these guys would be playing if they were playing Michigan this week? And I think that's a very different number as opposed to guys who play against Wisconsin or Rutgers than who would be playing against Michigan, even though Ryan Day says he leaves these decisions up to the medical staff and the players. But we do know they hold some players out who could go. They just don't want to play them against Toledo or Arkansas State so that they can play them against Wisconsin.
Yeah, one of the other familiar refrains from Ryan Day during this situation is it's a long season. It's a long season. This is certainly an Ohio State team that's built not to play 12 games, not to play 13 games, but to play 14 and 15 games. And I also wonder if the emphasis on toughness over the last 10 months, if that's also, I'm not saying these guys aren't tough. What I'm saying is I'm wondering if maybe some of this is too much practice, too much toughness emphasized in the offseason, that there's maybe some wear and tear things that are sprouting up right now.
I think it's an interesting question. And as I said, this isn't necessarily new, because they've had guys who have missed time. Maybe they've just got a bunch of guys who have various things, and that they're, I don't want to say recruiting the wrong people, because they're not, but the guys that they've recruited maybe have more injury history than others, like a Cam Brown, cornerback who misses last week, but he's missed plenty of time before. And so you've got to kind of move past that. But, then you got a guy like Jordan Hancock, who they had big plans for, and he just hasn't been able to practice. They're hoping to get him back to practicing in a week or so. But I do wonder how much, that physicality and the toughness aspect of it has, maybe guys have gotten, I don't want to say out of control, but given as much as they can, and maybe sometimes too much. And now you've got some lingering injuries that you have to deal with.
And I suppose the flip side of this equation is Julian Fleming, a guy who has struggled to stay healthy. He is healthy the last couple of weeks, and we have seen what he can do, scoring touchdowns and adding a physicality element to the receiving core, along with Emeka Egbuka, that really, it's almost like you got even more tight ends, and we're seeing the tight ends get involved more and more as well. But Julian Fleming has been able to stay healthy, and we're seeing what they saw out of Fleming this entire time.
Yeah, almost afraid to say those words, that he's able to stay healthy, because he has been so good since he's been playing. I rewatched the game this week, and you see him pushing guys down the field while he's run blocking, and also blocking for receivers who are headed his way. Emeka Egbuka caught one over the middle early on in the game, was taking it into the corner of the end zone towards the corner, and Julian Fleming is down there pushing his guy, a really physical guy. And he's finally coming into his own. I think he's about to explode offensively, but he is giving the cornerback number one for Wisconsin, who is dealing with most of the game, was just totally annoyed by Fleming and all of the blocking that he was doing. You could see the frustration, and that's just a guy that he's relentless, and he's so enthused to be on the field now. That dude is happy blocking. Like, he will just block because he's on the field and he's happy to be there.
That's one of the hallmarks of this Brian Hartline wide receiving core the last 6 years or so with Ohio State is not only do you have to be able to catch the ball, you've got to block as well. They put an emphasis on blocking. That's part of the reason why it translates so well into the NFL with all these guys at Ohio State is because Hartline emphasized blocking. That goes back to Urban Meyer, that you had to block in order to catch a pass for Ohio State.
Yeah, if you go to Terry McLaurin's Twitter page right now, he still has a pinned tweet of his time at Ohio State blocking two guys to spring another Buckeye for a touchdown. And it says something like, I enjoy this more than scoring myself. And they pass that down. It gets passed down from receiver to receiver. And then you also recruit that kind of player. The legend of Ryan Day seeing Garrett Wilson for the first time when he was scouting Matthew Baldwin as a quarterback, and he sees a receiver block somebody into a tree off the field, and he asks the coach, who's that? And the Texas coach is like, that's Garrett Wilson. And so that's the first time Ryan Day got to see that guy, as he's blocking somebody into a tree out of bounds. And so you recruit it, but then you also teach it and you preach it. And the guys who block get on the field, and the guys who don't.
We talked a little about tight ends. Mitch Rossi is listed as a tight end, but he's more of a fullback, which brings up this interesting obsession that some have with college football in the fullback position. You don't see it too often. Ohio State has been starting to go to it a little bit more with Mitch Rossi. We got to hear from Mitch Rossi today, and he said, I'm just a ball player. I guess that's the most fullback answer you could expect. What is this obsession with fullbacks with some folks?
I guess it's because we don't get to see it around here much. And this is the first year that we've really seen the I formation as much as we have. And I say as much as we have, it's been about 6 plays. So it's not much, but it's something new and it's something to talk about. And after Mitch Rossi's touchdown run out of the I, the fullback dive against Toledo, I think I went back, and the last fullback dive out of the I formation for the Buckeyes came in a Michigan game in 2010. So it's been a long time since they've run that play. So it's new, but it's very, very old. And it's since it's new here, then we're going to talk about it. But Mitch Rossi is the epitome of a fullback, and he's very entertaining and a little self-deprecating, but also a really good representative of the Ohio State offense and team as a whole.
Everything old is new again, which brings us to the Ohio State defense. Through four games of Jim Knowles' defense, are the Silver Bullets back?
If they were, it would look a lot like this. I think they're doing a lot of good things. And the interesting thing that I took out of this game is, since Jim Knowles was hired, we were pointing at this Wisconsin game, like, how are you going to, your defense won't be able to hold up against Wisconsin. You're going to have to go with 3 linebackers. You can't go with 4-2-5. And he did. And not only did he go with a 4-2-5, he went with Jack Sawyer instead of JT Tuimoloau to start the game. Like, he went with his lightest defensive end to start the game against Wisconsin's running game, to show you, like, I could put whoever I want out there. My defense can handle this. Now, they gave up the bulk of their running yards. The rushing yards that they gave up were late in the game, well after the game was, no longer in doubt, and just really impressive. Not that Wisconsin's receivers were not great, and Graham Mertz is what he is, but we've seen Wisconsin go through a lot of teams over the years and run the ball on them, and the Ohio State defensive line held up, and Tommy Eichenberg continues to just be one of the best linebackers in the nation.
3 straight blowouts for Ohio State. Rutgers comes to town on Saturday. This should be another blowout, correct?
If it's not, then you've got a story. I think the line is something like 41 points. And I don't know how Rutgers is going to score. There are injury concerns about their top 2 quarterbacks, I believe. And how are they going to stop Ohio State? This is one of these things where Ryan Day is friendly with Greg Schiano, so that may dictate the score more than what Rutgers can dictate it.
And let's talk about Greg Schiano. Obviously, former Ohio State defensive coordinator, left on good terms. A lot of complimentary things said about Greg Schiano on Tuesday coming from Columbus. As he built Rutgers into a respectable program, he left for the NFL. They took a nosedive. They're back on the path to respectability now under Greg Schiano. He's been there a few seasons now.
Yeah, the injuries have really been an issue. Now they've got some good players. It's about the depth. And when you have injuries and you have no depth, then you are lost. And so if they can keep guys healthy, he can recruit. this is a guy who has had commitments from Saquon Barkley at one point, I think, and where these this New Jersey footprint that is there, if it can be honed, not unlike Maryland and the DMV area, it can do some things. It might be doing some things better once Rutgers gets out of the East and the Big Ten goes to no divisions, and maybe it's a little bit easier for them. But it's just going to be really, really tough for them. And can they get an 8-win season every 3 or 4 years and be happy with that? I think Greg Schiano can, because he's back home.
Ohio State takes on the Scarlet Knights as the Buckeyes. We've been getting used to hearing this every week from Ohio State. It's about competitive stamina. It's about being our best selves. Are they buying that? I mean, we hear this every week. Are we seeing the evidence of that buy-in on the field?
I think so. But also after the Wisconsin game, CJ Stroud talked about having to make sure he doesn't get bored on the field and make sure that he stays engaged. And it was just an odd comment. And then he said, not that I'm bored or anything, and not that I'm not engaged, but it was just an odd comment. To me, it tells me that sometimes maybe they have gotten bored, and it's easy to do in blowouts like that. And clearly he started out 8 for 8 and then took a dip, but even his dips are better than everybody else's rise, so they can, if the worst thing that happens to this team is sometimes CJ Stroud throws a couple of incompletions, they're going to be fine. But I mean, it's on the coaches to make sure that they stay up and keep this team engaged. But also, when they're holding guys out, the guys know, well, I don't have to play against Rutgers. I'm a little gimpy right now. I don't need to play because it's just Rutgers, or it's just Toledo, or it's just Arkansas State. There's some mixed messaging that can happen there at times where at some point they have to turn it on and just go and know that, okay, from now on, every game is going to be difficult. And I don't know if that switch gets turned on this week, probably next week.
All right. Thank you very much, Tony Gerdeman from BuckeyeHuddle.com. Thank you.